Okay, so Weisenhaupt was not a Freemason when he founded the Illuminati, but he became one the next year. His conscious plan was to infiltrate and, where possible, to dominate the lodges in order to select the enlightened from among the more promising Freemasons. Together with Baron von Kigney, named a bookseller named Joan Bood, and other associates, he had for a time some success. The Masonic lodges at Munich and Eichstätt became seminaries of the Illuminati, and their influence was extended in others. But the Jesuits of devoutly Catholic Bavaria mounted an attack on the new society and made use of personal scandals. For example, the fact that Weisenhaupt had an illegitimate child, to discredit it. In March 1785, the Elector of Bavaria specifically outlawed both Freemasons and Illuminati. Weishaupt, dismissed from his university post, fled to Gotha in fear of arrest. No further authentic record of the Illuminati remains. In 1789, the fuse laid by men like Diderot and Voltaire set off the explosion of the French Revolution. A vast number of books and pamphlets have been written to prove and disprove the supposed connection between the Revolution and Freemasonry. First in the field in 1789 and 1799 were the Abbé Barrel, a French émergé in England, and former Freemason, and Scottish writer called John Robson, who claimed that the whole revolution was secretly planned and directed by Freemasons. Order out of chaos? A later addition to the theory was that the real hidden hand was that of the Illuminati, who had transferred their secret center and their operations from Bavaria to France. If so, they must have diverged greatly from the ideas of Weisenhaupt, who, as we have seen, expected monarchy to disappear without violence under the imperceptible influence of mortality. No serious historian today believes that the French Revolution was caused by a conspiracy involving, according to the Cadet de whatever, only 27 true initiates. You want to be part of the 27 club, guy? That's where it comes from, the 27. No serious historian today believes that the French Revolution was caused by a conspiracy involving, according to the Cadet de Gossereau, only 27 true initiates, while all the others involved were cast as dupes. J.J. Mounier, refuting Barrel in 1801, commented coolly, "Very complicated causes were replaced by simple causes within the grasp of the most idle and most superficial minds. That Freemasonry was one of the contributory forces in causing the downfall of the Ancien Régime is a far more serious proposition, and one to which many French Freemasons have ascended with pride. Here, as in the American Revolution, the evidence leads us to conclude that Freemasonry as an organization played little or no part, but that Freemasons filled some important roles. They were probably associated for most part with the moderate groups that shaped the course of the Revolution until 1791, and were crushed or swept aside as it mounted to its climax. The Duc d'Orléans, who was Grand Master on the eve of the Revolution, stood for constitutional monarchy and was guillotined in 1793. Lafayette was a figure of the same type. What is certain is that in 1792, when Jacobians were in power, Freemasonry was outlawed and the lodges were dissolved. This seems to argue either that the Jacobians equated the Freemasons with the moderates, whom they regarded as enemies, or at least that they considered the lodges a likely hiding place for counter-revolutionary plotters. Both hypotheses rule out the idea that Jacobians and Freemasons were hand in glove, to say nothing of the notion that the revolution was still following a course charted by Freemasonry. The question is complicated by the fact that all the Jacobean leaders, Marat, Danton, and Robespierre, among others, have been named as Freemasons. But the evidence in every case is doubtful, and even if it's been accepted, the possibility remains that these men, by the time they came to power, had abandoned or turned against Freemasonry. No. No, they didn't. Freemasonry began to function legally again in France in 1798. When Napoleon became emperor, he informed the Freemasons that their highly moral aim and purpose were worthy of his favor and protection. This took the form of vigilant control, with the emperor's brother Joseph installed as Grand Master, though he was never initiated into Freemasonry. The Freemasons evidently drew the lesson that safety lay in being loyal to whoever was in power. The Grand Orient welcomed the Bourbons in 1814. Napoleon during the 100 Days. What's the 100 Days? And the king once more. What the fuck? The Freemasons evidently drew the lesson that safety lay in being loyal to whoever was in power. The Grand Orient welcomed the Bourbons in 1814. Napoleon during the 100 Days, and the king once more after Waterloo. Horrible writing. For some, however, Freemasonry was indissolubly connected with the struggle for freedom. Its presence, or at least the presence of Freemasons, was detected in the Conspiracy of Equals of 1796, a last despairing attempt to put France back on the road of pure revolution. In the United Irishmen, who rebelled against British rule in 1798, in the Philhellenic movement devoted to the liberation of Greece, and in the Decembrist revolt of 1825 against Tsarism. The facts regarding each of these episodes are obscure, but there is no ground for supporting the existence of any centrally directed Masonic campaign against authority. In one country, however, it is legitimate to say that the lodges as a whole were deeply involved in politics. This country was Italy. The Pope. Were democratic and forward-looking elements aimed at the goal of national unity finally achieved in 1860. Their instrument was a secret society whose members took the name of Carbonari. Carbon, A-R-I. Carbon raw, I. Their lodges were not identical with the Masonic lodges, but membership overlapped to a great extent. It is fairly certain that most Freemasons were Carbonari, and most Carbonari, sounds like food, including leading figures such as Garibaldi, were Freemasons. Similarly, a similarity of outlook too was shown by the clause of the rules of the Carbonari, providing for freedom of conscience, but enjoying worship of a supreme being. Both the society and Freemasonry were proscribed throughout Italy, with the exception of Piedmont, the base of operations in the campaign for national unity. The lodges began to meet openly again only after Italy was united, when Garibaldi became Grand Master. An important consequence of the alliance with the Carbonari was that it ranged the Freemasons of Italy in militant opposition to the Vatican. While the country was divided into many small units, all of them under absolute rule and without democratic rights, a considerable territory in central Italy was governed by the Pope in the capacity of temporal sovereign. The popes of the period, to retain their dominations, set themselves against national unity and allied themselves with neighboring kings and grand dukes. Carbonari and Freemasons naturally maintained that the flag of secular Italy should fly over the whole country, and that the Pope should be content with his spiritual empire. Often they went further and made it clear that in a united Italy, the authority of the church would be limited, and priests would be deprived of the power to tell people what to read or what to believe. Grand Master Lemmy declared, "We have applied the chisel to the last refuge of superstition, and the Vatican will fall beneath our vivifying mallet. Masons, he urged, should work to scatter the stones of the Vatican, so as to build with them the temple of the emancipated nation. The Vatican replied in kind. Between 1821 and 1902, the popes issued 10 encyclicals to denounce Freemasonry and to renew the ban first pronounced by Clement XII. Though the actual cause of hostility was limited to Italy, and was, at least in partial part, the ban of this time was enjoyed on Catholics everywhere. In France, after the period of tactical conciliation towards the Bourbon monarchy, Freemasonry again showed strong democratic sympathies. The Revolution of 1830, which disposed Charles X and installed a constitutional monarchy under Louis Philippe, was celebrated by a Masonic festival. In 1848, when he in turn was overthrown and France became a republic, Freemasons again rejoiced. An address to the new government by the Grand Orient asserted that Masonic banners had always borne the words liberty, equality, fraternity, and exposed pleasure in the grand national and social movement that had just taken place. The republic was short-lived. A coup d'etat in 1851 brought another Napoleon to power. His prefect of police ordered Freemasons to dissolve their lodges, and the Grand Orient complied. Soon after, Napoleon III decided to adopt the tactics of the first emperor and told the Freemasons that they were welcome to reassemble with his nephew, Prince Lucien Murat, as Grand Master. Murat imposed on them a new constitution of an authoritarian kind. Blech. As a Masonic historian put it, the independent spirit of French Freemasonry was quenched, and they were expected to display inactive and blind submission. In 1860, Murat made a speech in sympathy with the Pope. The Masonic Journal demanded his resignation, but it was surpassed and several lodge masters were suspended. After a couple of years of disputes, the emperor gave ground, modified the constitution, and replaced Murat. But his abduction in 1870 was greeted with delight by Freemasons. His abdication. The next year saw armed conflict between the New Republic government, socially conservative in policy, and the Paris Commune, which had socialists at its head. There was by now a distinctly socialist trend of thought in Freemasonry. Louis Blanc, who had raised a slogan of La République Sociale in the 1848 Revolution, and Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, the best-known French socialist thinker, were both Freemasons. The Parisian lodges tried to mediate between the government and the commune, but the government rebuffed their efforts. They then decided to display their banners on the walls of Paris to join the commune if the banners were touched by a single bullet. Several thousand Masons, Jelinek writes in his history of the commune, proceeded down the boulevards amid enormous enthusiasm. The marchers were gay with symbolic ribbons, blue, red, green, white, black, gold, and silver, and spangles, triangles, suns, and trowels. Bullets not only hit the banners, but wounded a Mason, and the lodges resolved to defend the commune in arms. Despite this, more pictures. See, like that's the church and the lodge at war at this time. Alright, oh my god. Okay, there's only 2 left, so maybe I'm gonna stop it and hopefully get done in one more.